Let's get things going here. Welcome to the Details Podcast. And of course, leave it to James to set up a 10 a.m. Recording session on a long weekend. And I'm not too pleased about it. I know Gabe isn't either.
Guys, I have shit to do in the morning. And mainly it's sleep.
Hey, you guys know my email. You can send your complaints there. Go ahead.
Well, I knew if we did anything later, James would have been like, we could have just polished this off in the morning.
Man, I'm up at like 6, 7 a.m. no matter what. So like, you guys are honestly just lagging behind my time. This is afternoon here, boys. Like, I'm getting ready to fire up lunch after this. Like, you guys are.
What are you in bed by 6:30? What is this? What are you, senior?
Actually, though, because aren't you're the one waking up at like 3 a.m. to watch Last Dance, aren't you? Is that why?
Yeah, I'm in bed by 9:30. Yeah, usually books open by 9:30, lights are out by 10, I'd say.
Must be a white guy thing, Gabe.
You got your reading glasses on. You're like, oh, it's getting late. 8:45. The street lights are on.
Well, we want to welcome Gabe back to the program when he's not playing game shows on Thursday nights. He occasionally joins us here on the podcast. So, Gabe, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thank you. Long time. First time, long time. Second time, long time. Oh, man.
Second time, long time. Gentlemen, how's your long weekend going? I mean, it's kind of a weird time to be asking that question. I think nothing's really changed, but... I mean, James, we should wish you now a belated birthday. We wish you a happy early birthday, belated birthday. How did your birthday end up turning out?
It's fantastic. Yeah, it's regular Tuesday day in quarantine life. Went to work, came home, worked out, went to sleep, and woke up the next day. And didn't even really acknowledge it was my birthday. So that was about it.
You didn't have a bunch of cars pulling up with balloons?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Dude,
I showed up with a Metro cake or anything.
If anyone was trying to show up with cars, honking horns, I'm egging them, bro. I'm telling you, I think I made that loud and clear. No, I'm not trying to create a scene outside.
James is like, I got a cannon for an arm and I got nobody covering me. I'm in.
Well played. Well, I'm glad you were able to at least somewhat enjoy your birthday. It's not every day somebody turns 20, so that's good for you.
20, this guy says.
The baby face assassin, James Roberts.
The baby face. Hey, just because you're old don't mean I'm young. You know what I'm saying? That's not the same thing.
Listen, I'm just trying to live vicariously through you now at this point, brother. Anyways, gentlemen, long weekend. Nonetheless, had a lot going on between UFC. Obviously, Last Dance finally wrapping up. I kind of wanted to lead this conversation with UFC because I tuned in for it. I had invested interest in it. Last sort of minutes, I got on a euchre game with Dan and Ty, and that's not going to help at my age at all at this point. Just continuing a dirt pile on that. But Tyler was like, hey, like, we got to do this early because Overeem's fighting tonight. I'm like, oh my God, Overeem, like, that name recognized. If you don't know him, guy literally looks like Donkey Kong. Guy's a fucking animal, right? He's got the ears that pop out.
Got traps up to my ears.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, the only way I can really get interested in this fight is if I sprinkle some money on this fight. So I sprinkled some money, and my train of thought was, I probably would have lost this money up to this point anyway, so why not just go heavy on this fight anyways, right? Make it a little more interesting for myself.
You have a problem.
No, listen, if we've learned anything from the MJ doc, listen, if we've learned anything from this documentary, it's not a problem. I'm just really competitive.
Yeah. And that's called denial.
That's step one, right? And so I put money on it, and then I felt like a complete jerk after I found out that Walt Harris had his daughter die like months before, and I didn't feel right at all cheering for Overeem at this point. And like, I'm sure, James, you watching this fight leading up to the fight, they probably talked about this a lot, right?
Yeah, it was definitely a bit of a storyline. I mean, it's kind of hard to ignore, but Overeem, dude, the fun fact for him that you might find insane, he fought his first UFC fight in 99, I believe. It was the year 1999.
That's when Tyler told me that he was in that fight. When Tyler told me he was in that fight, I couldn't believe that he was still fighting.
Yeah, so he was like he was like one of the first UFC pioneers, and then he like went away and came back. So he's been around doing this thing for ever. Yes,
It's a long time.
Yes.
Well, Walt Harris was the Vegas favorite. I mean, it wasn't
Yes.
an overwhelming favorite, but he still was the favorite. It's kind of one of the reasons I went with Overeem, because I'm like, if I'm gonna gamble on this, might as well make some decent coin on it.
Yeah,
And,
but I mean, man, to be 40, whatever, after fighting this long and still be have a number beside yourself in the heavyweight contention. I mean, that guy's like, you can't fight experience, right? So when this Walt Harris guy comes in with maybe too much emotion, maybe too much is on his mind, like that's the worst opponent to have. A guy that's been in there against literally everybody.
Right. And it doesn't sound like he's slowing down. Like he was talking about his next potential fight after he'd won this one, right?
No,
Nobody's asking the clear question.
Sorry,
which question?
Nobody's asking the clear question.
That's what I was getting.
A man that old fighting in the UFC. You're telling me there's not a little bit of juice going on?
I would say
slowing down. Come on, guys. What are we talking about here, boys?
I don't have any intel, but I would definitely bet on the side that he has most
his age. That's the intel.
I would say whatever in the labs whatever in the labs in Mexico, he has about 85% of that in his veins, is what I'm assuming, is what I'm saying. So whatever that is, I don't know, but we'll just look away for those tests.
It's only fitting that we're talking about this because the Lance Armstrong documentary comes out next weekend as well. So, but were you surprised, James? You did watch the fight, I assume?
Yes.
Were you surprised that the referee Dan Margliotta, I can't even pronounce his name, he didn't stop the fight at that point? Because I couldn't believe that Overeem survived that.
Yeah, man, it's really tough. It happened in UFC 249 as well when Dominic Cruz got stopped a little early, and he was really upset about it. The stoppages and stuff, and the pressure put on these refs and these octagons is immensely difficult, right? Because you have these guys that are fighting for their careers, their money. They don't make enough anyway, so they need every shot they can get. And time again, we see dudes get knocked down and get back up again the next round and end up winning the fight. So you're really not you're never out of these things until you're super out of them. So the ref always has this pressure of, one, saving the fighter, but two, also trying to give him the proper acknowledgement for if he's still fighting back, right? So again, we talk about experience, right? When you've been in those fights for that long and you know these refs and you know these guys have seen you get knocked out. So they know, okay, well, when he took that hit last time, he was more wobbly, this, that, and the other thing, right? So with Overeem being there for so long, that is 100% why he was allowed to continue fighting that fight, because they know, they've seen him before, they've seen him drop, they know he's okay, right. so they're gonna let him fight.
Yeah, because I counted on like 3 different occasions I thought that fight was over. Like I was just like, there's no way. And the one thing I learned, because you watched the last one, this was my first one, is the shots sound so much more vicious when there is not an audience. It was gross, especially when Overeem was feeding him when he had him in the headlock. I was just like how is his face just not mush at this point? It was disgusting.
And it's eye-opening too when you go and now even today, go hop on and search up how much those fighters made, and you're gonna be like, for doing what?
Right.
So, I don't know.
Right. It was definitely mind-blowing stuff.
How much money would it take for you to hop into the octagon against like an okay undercard? Like not even okay, like a bottom tier undercard.
Dude, if I'm at this,
how much money? Just there's a dollar amount. Everybody's got a dollar amount.
It's a mil. A mil gets me to do anything. I think a mil gets me to do anything.
Whoa, hey.
Okay, easy. Don't put that. Don't put that on the internet.
You put the money down. We'll talk later. It's done.
We'll talk specifics later.
Yeah, but nonetheless, this was
don't skirt out of the question. How much money would it take for you?
Oh, you want me to answer the question?
Yes.
I don't know.
If it's under 10 grand, I'll fund it.
Wait, I got that.
Let's set that up.
Yeah.
Let's set that
We're
up.
gonna e-transfer that later today, and you're gonna be knocked out tomorrow. Yeah, we got that.
I don't know.
That's a video right there. Come on.
Yeah, I'll really be hopping out the screen for that one. That's for sure. No, and watching this for the first time was eye-opening for me, because now I'm watching this, and we had the soccer game yesterday. I don't know if you watched that, James, But and I don't know how weird that was. But just watching, live sports without fans was just a real eye-opening experience, and it just got me starting to think about the NBA and the NBA's possible return. And if they come back, like everything's gonna have to be on tape delay. And like I've read some things that have suggested like that is going to be the case. Like even live betting is going to be off the table, right? Like they won't be able to live bet because these games will have to be delayed because. I mean, we're lucky that KG's not playing in today's NBA, but there's guys like Pat Beverly. There's guys out there that are still going to shit talk. There's coaches that are probably going to, leave Giannis open, right? Like we want him to shoot the ball. Like those are things that, I'm sure that these NBA teams won't want to let out as well, right? Like it's going to be a totally different experience once the NBA comes back.
Also, you have to go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I think the NBA can have fun with it too, though, and even making those like domes, like we've seen in that Space Jam scene in Last Dance. I don't know,
Jordan
maybe, and do the live delay and stuff, but actually mic them. Like, let's add a different element to it, maybe, and see if that actually creates any more. I don't know.
Here's the thing. I mean, it can go a number of different routes, right? So if you mic them, there's a whole bunch of gameplay X's and O's that might be a little bit more secretive, but I'm sure coaches and players don't want to get leaked out. And also the NBA brand image. The stuff that we're seeing from The Last Dance, where Mike is calling Scott Barella ho, you can't, I don't think that's allowed to get leaked out. He's
calling Larry Bird a bitch, like Larry Legend.
Yeah, you call him F you when you just wiped him out of a series. Like that's stuff that's not going to get leaked out while you're still in the league, So I don't see Patrick Beverly saying, I'm sure, expletive to whoever he's guarding. I don't know if that's going to get leaked out in the live tape delay. I would love to see it. Maybe the NBA goes NBA After Dark and they have a secondary replay of the game where everybody's mic'd up. Rated R, hey, everybody gets to watch. That'd be really cool too. I made an extra charge. I'm pitching money to watch that. I put in to watch the NBA players all fully mic'd up, uncensored. That'd be fantastic. So maybe that's something where they try to recoup costs. But when it comes to things like live betting and whatnot, you're not worried about the coaches and the players. You're worried about all the support staff that these things get leaked out of. All the people who are going to be tending to the game, the NBA front office people. The leak is never really insulated to that 15 group of people. It's much, much, much bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that you're talking about, the NBA being cautious and worried about their brand. They did the NBA Inside Stuff reunion yesterday with Ahmad Rashad. And, they had all these old timers on the call: Karl Malone, Shaq, Charles, Clyde Drexler, David Robinson, all these guys. And if you can only imagine, these guys are just cussing up the storm. They don't realize what, proper media Zoom etiquette is. And I highly recommend you watch it because it's just a bunch of grown old men like on their porch just making fun of and roasting each other. But even to your point though, James, like you see the mic'd up stuff that they play during NBA games and it's so muddled down. It's just like, oh, let's get back on defense or good job. Like they're not even saying like, because what they say has to be run by each team's PR team, and them, it's just condensed to a certain amount. So it's like, even if we are going to get that mic'd up stuff, it's going to be the most generic stuff that we already hear.
Yeah, I guess that sucks too. But I don't know. With it not having fans in the background, I don't think you actually have to genuinely mic players up. I just mean that there's going to be more audio for us to get from. That's the main thing.
Yeah, I say they go NBA After Dark, NBA Unplugged. Let us pay an extra fee. Give us a live stream somewhere else, and then I'll pay the dollars. So that's an easy. Think about it. Worldwide,
that says a lot because I know Gabe doesn't pay for a lot of his content.
I mean, when I say pay, I'm going to find a stream of which they have.
But also, let's watch who's saying that too over there. I don't know. I get a lot of streams in my email inbox, but they're not from me. I don't know. That's all I'm saying.
All I know is
you've got a lot of worms on your computer thanks to me too, right?
Fucking LimeWire is downloaded on here again somehow. I don't know.
There's a throwback. I'm the old one.
Folks, he really isn't 20.
Speaking of the NBA return, more good news coming out. As of today, 16 NBA facilities are opened up for voluntary workouts. Some teams that are included in their Cavs, Blazers, Nuggets, Grizzlies, Heat, Magic, Bucks, Raptors, Hawks, Pacers, Jazz, Kings, Lakers, Clippers, Rockets, Pelicans. The reason I list a lot of these teams, the interesting thing about a lot of these teams are a lot of them are not playoff teams. So I found that really interesting once I saw kind of the list of the teams that were, opening up their facilities. But I also thought it was interesting because we had a call of the NBA superstars that, spoke to each other and try to band it together and try to get something going. LeBron, Kawhi, Giannis, CP3, Curry, Westbrook, Dame, KD. Now, I think that in itself is a totally interesting conversation of who was in that call, who got the call. Like that's a 30 for 30 in itself, right? Like I would love to see the footage of that, like Riley Curley running around in the back while Steph Curry's trying to convince these guys that the season should start again.
Did Kawhi have to get the call? Like who's worried about what
I want to know. I want to know how many
what he
words. I want to know how many words Kawhi said in the meeting, dude.
I want the transcript. What does Kawhi say?
Over
Right.
under 5. I got the under on 5 words.
Now, I brought this up because, like, I did find it interesting that only of those players, only 6 of them are going to be playing in the playoffs. Like, do you think that it would have been more value to have, I don't know if it would have been, Nikolai from the Nuggets or Kyle Lowry from the Raptors? Like, would it have been more beneficial to have more players from playoff teams?
I personally don't think it matters. I think like whatever backup plan you have to follow, where you have to call in a certain amount of players or like whatever that case is, that should be decided before the season starts, and then that stays the way for that year, and whether or not they're in the playoffs or not, whatever, that shouldn't be the point of this whole thing anyways, right? All these team facilities being open back up again too, that's not the point. It's not the point for them to get ready for the playoffs. It's just so that we're promoting that this is going to go forward and move forward, and these cities are allowing this because that they believe and their institutions believe that they can handle it. So I don't know.
That's a good point. Okay. No, I think that's exact. You hit the nail on the head, James. I think the guys who you've named are all kind of senior, highly regarded intellectual folks who we value their opinions on things, especially when it comes to the players in the league, right? Mm-hmm. So obviously you're going to value their opinion when it comes to, risking player safety, which is a job number 1 in the situation. And also maybe the league's survival after quarantine, right? So weighing all those options, those are the guys you'd instantly think of, like, whose opinion would I most value and who has the most experience around the league? Those are the names that would probably pop up anyways. Now, granted, if they're going to be a playoff team or not, James is exactly right. It doesn't really matter because they're making much larger scale, thoughtful decisions that doesn't necessarily have to be dependent on what team they're on.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, guys like CP3 are on there because he's like the head of the Players Association as well, right? These are all guys that probably, have, larger opinions that weigh heavily more than others because of their, affiliation to the Players Association. Obviously, they're superstars and they're representative of the league as a whole. Now, I wanted to ask you guys, because I know you guys are both baseball fans. I can't remember what the player's name is. I think it was Snell that came out and, had talked about what he had to gain from playing a baseball season. And Bryce Harper was a guy that kind of ponied off that as well. And he said, the guy has sort of a valid point now. So I wanted to bring this up because this is a contrast of 2 different leagues where, the NBA's brightest and best are coming together to try to make a season happen. And then you have Bryce Harper, who is, the highest paid player in the league, who's chiming away from afar, but is not really making any effort to get this thing going.
Baseball fundamentally is a very, very different league. Like, it's
there's a bigger problem there between the owners and the players in that league.
Mm-hmm. Or even more, there's just the way players are even respected in the MLB is, if we look at a spectrum of player appreciation, player power in a league, on one end you have the NFL, which is, we'll get to that later. And on the other end, you have the NBA, where basically it's a player-run league. I don't even know if their NBA has a head office anymore.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
It's Chris Paul's living room. Yeah. That's interesting.
It's a State Farm commercial with Adam Silver. And somewhere in the middle, but closer towards the NFL, is the MLB. And although the players are very well paid, and there's a lot of support for them, there's not a lot of say that they get. You kind of just a lot of show pony shit. And that's why you have such expansive minor leagues where you can pull in swap players at any given time because there is no genuine power. Granted, there's a lot of, again, access that I'm sure they get, but I don't think Bryce Harper would have any sort of levity to get something going without the say of the MLB and all of the owners kind of banding together and saying, okay, this is what we want to get done. As opposed to the NBA, smaller team size, 1, 2, higher star power across the board, no matter what team you're on. And 3, and most importantly, it's a player-run league. We know more players who have more say in how the league is run than we know of any other league in North America. So obviously it's not a comparable situation.
Absolutely. I agree with all that as well. And on top of it, I think to a bigger point, farther than sports and something that can be talked about in the real world as well, like there should still just be an initial aspect of freedom, like, listen, baseball's going to happen. Okay. So you get the memo. This is when things are happening, but there shouldn't be if you don't show up, you're cut. We don't know how to do, like, we're not ready for this. That's very clear. That's been clear. It's clear going forward. We don't know what to do next. That's also clear. There just needs to be a part of humility now with this and with this year and the season, and to understand that if these people don't feel safe and don't think it's worth their, athletic ability to go play for that sport, then don't do that then, and don't expect that of them. That's my issue with the whole thing. It's just, there's just got to be freedom. That's all there is.
Right. And like the thing that I keep seeing when I see the NBA press release or any story that's talked about, like there's emphasis on the word voluntary, right? And like I think that just has to be the norm across all platforms, right? Like I mean, Gabe brought up a great point. There's minor league players that I'm sure would love to be called up and have the opportunity. Unfortunately, that causes another debate, right? Like because then you're jeopardizing positions for the pros that don't feel safe playing, but they have contracts that are guaranteed with these teams.
But again, I talk about humility, man. Now, if us three were on a team, right? Let's say we're on a Big 3 basketball team, and you two wanted to come back and play during the COVID, and then so during the pandemic, you guys wanted to come back, and I was like, no, that's stupid. It's not worth my time. Odds are you'll convince me. Because my teammates going to go back, and all the guys that I play with in the locker room every day, and my friends are going to go play, then I'm going to go play with them too, Like, the way to kill those situations out is just to not even acknowledge it and go show up and do your job, and then eventually everyone's going to be okay with it. But I'm all for it. Have your opinions, have your worries, have your complaints. Just do what you believe in, and that should be okay. I'm not going to knock you for it.
Well, here's the thing, right? The league, okay, let's use the NBA as a perfect example. They have an especially odd circumstance because the whole quarantine shutdown of leagues kind of happened in their backyard with the Rudy Gobert situation. So now they have to be extremely cautious about how teams are going to interact with each other because you may have a team implosion where one guy, like, okay, let's take this, Fantasy Island where they're going to go play a whole bunch of games, which I think is fucking ridiculous.
It's called Disney World, yes.
No, it's Fantasy Island.
It is Fantasy Island. That's what I'm saying.
This is still a fantasy. Because, so hypothetically, let's talk epidemiology here, kids. So say if I take 600 people.
Let me grab my dictionary.
Yeah.
Science corner with Gabe. If I take 600 people who, even though if I test them every day, we don't know what we're testing for. No matter what anybody tells you, we don't know what we're testing for. We can have a good guess, a very, very good guess, but you still don't know. So now I have a seclusion of people who would have been safe in their homes anyways, but I take them and I plop them somewhere else. So if one guy gets sick, I've exposed 600 people immediately. And those 600 people happen to be LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard. These happen to be the biggest names in the sport. So now my insurance premium on these teams are sky high, which is what nobody's really talking about. I think a lot of these owners are more afraid of their insurance premium on these players and their franchise than they really are afraid of the actual quarantine and the virus in and of themselves. So these are things that the NBA inherently has to worry about, and any league has to worry about. I mean, besides the UFC. UFC doesn't care. Everybody's expendable. Who cares? You die, we'll find somebody else who wants to fight. But in these other sports, your star power is just as expensive as your playing power. So I can't afford to risk you in some situation, in an isolated situation. It sounds like a good idea, but if one staff person gets sick, the whole thing goes up in flames. And that's a very, very big dice roll that I don't think people would want to gamble on.
So this is the thing that Adam Silver's made clear, though. He says that, it's inevitable that someone is going to catch it. And you have to sign up for this knowing that if someone catches this, we're not stopping for you. We're putting you in quarantine. We're going to continue to test people and we're going to move on with the show. And that's where this whole dilemma, this is why it's taking so long because, again, I brought it up last night, is trying to find a consensus during a crisis, right? Like to get everybody on board. But that's the one thing that he has made perfectly clear. And that's the thing that's going to either push us forward or hold it back.
Well, it's a nuts thing, which is I was actually quite shocked that he did say that, which is what was my hesitancy in the first place. Because if you do that, you're every time somebody gets sick, you're double increasing the risk of more people getting sick. Mm-hmm. And again, everybody's isolated together, in which case, I don't know if you guys ever went to sleepaway camp, but when you go to
brown people don't do camps.
That sounds like some white shit, but I didn't do it.
I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say it. I'm glad James did.
I did not go to sleepaway camp either, but I'm told.
Parentheses.
Yeah. Sleepaway camp. I didn't. But do you think I could afford sleepaway camp? Or you nuts? That being said, so I'm told that when you're in a bunk, when kids are in a bunk, if one kid gets sick, you have to shut down the whole bunk. Like everybody has to get quarantined together, which is what happens. And these things go up like wildfire. Now think sleepaway camp with nicer facilities and more black kids, and you get the NBA Fantasy Island. And if somebody gets sick, you got to shut down the whole bunk. You can keep on playing basketball all you want, but as soon as a big star, they say they can keep playing, but if LeBron goes down, they're not playing anymore.
Yeah.
If
Kawhi
goes down,
isn't Tom Hanks like the perfect example of this? As soon as we found out Tom Hanks had the coronavirus, everybody's like, stop all the flights, shut down production. Like we cannot continue forward as a society.
They thought it was going to be for Idris Elba, and Idris Elba, everybody was like, nah, keep waving it through. We're fine. Yeah, you're sick. Okay, buddy. All right. You're not James Bond, sir.
leave it to Gabe to bring up the race card.
That wasn't race card. I just think Idris Elba was overrated.
Hey, if anybody's followed your comedy, we know your brand, okay, Gabe?
Yeah, well, you're not wrong.
But no, you do bring a good point. Like we're talking about, I think people look at this and say, they're thinking worst case scenario is going to be one of our smaller tier players. It's not going to be one of our big names. But, if one of the biggies fall, right, like what does that look like and how much?
The virus doesn't know. The virus doesn't know who is the better player and who isn't. And that's this is the scary part.
And the interesting thing is, LeBron is older than a lot of these guys. He's more likely to catch corona.
Oh, shut up, dude. Get out of here. I'm done with you. No, I'm done with you. He puts in
baloney.
He puts in more millions of dollars than you have days in a week in his body in a year. Then don't worry about it. You're fine.
So you're telling me LeBron has the vaccine right now?
100%, dude. Oh yeah, my man has a sauna back home that cures everything. It's a clean slate.
There's an ice chamber for that.
If Magic got cure for AIDS,
I'm
pretty sure. You don't go to LA for a studio. You go to LA to get a cure for everything.
Well played. I can't even trump that. That stinks the cake.
No, but you make such a good point, right? Like there's already an asterisk beside the season, but what kind of asterisk is there when Anthony Davis, Kawhi, LeBron, and James Harden all have COVID? And can't play in the playoffs. Like, what's the?
Right. That's nuts. And I'll tell you for damn sure, if the Raptors win again, I'm not having this argument again. I'm not gonna fight you, MFs. I'm not.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, right? Because someone's gonna get it for sure, and like they can't say it out loud, but they hope it's a certain not 10 people, right? And then if one of those 10 were to get it, now that kind of
changes everything. They're so glad Rudy Gobert is the one who got it the first time. They're like, nah, Rudy. You gotta shut it down, but damn, Rudy. And the fact that Rudy was an idiot about it on top of it made it look worse. But they're like, Rudy.
So the thing that I'm going to push back against with, though, is I do see this as a possible thing, because even still, there should be a way, and I know it's very difficult logistically and not this simple, but there should be simply a way that this can happen so that you are clean, and you just can't leave. Like there's just gotta be 2 spaces. There's a wall in between, and you can't go past this wall until you've passed the COVID test. And once you've passed it, you can't leave.
So hypothetically speaking, you would have to quarantine people like months prior before they show up.
Right.
So but technically there is a protocol for this, for like when you go into hot zones in certain countries. Right?
And Adam Silver strategically used the word campus because I heard this on a podcast, it sounds more friendly. And this is kind of what these guys would live on, like a campus, like, lifestyle on a day-to-day basis where it's just.
It's not the Olympics. They're not going to the Olympics.
Yeah. That's exactly what I thought.
It's it's the Hunger Games. It's the basketball Hunger Games. That's what they're playing for.
Right.
And I don't like that they're trying to dress it up and they're like, you're going to campus. You know what else happens on campuses? A lot of STDs and like people get sick. So like it's gonna happen. And what I don't want, in all seriousness, what I don't want is everybody's like, you know what, if we get there, we just got to get there and fix it. And then something happens, everybody's going to be like, who even thought of this idea? No, I don't. We have the moment now to like be far more cautious than we usually are. Why not be cautious? Listen, guys, it's sad. This could have been one of my favorite seasons of all time. You know what? It's gone. It happened. You crashed your car. It's totaled. I love the car, but now we got to get a new car. It is what it is. Sometimes
you're right, because there's definitely media beat writers that are just waiting to hit enter on their think pieces about when all shit hits the fan and the flames start to go up.
Don't you guys think that this is also lingering this long because it's almost clear to everyone in that association that they would make more money from December to August than they do September to July?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Definitely. Like this is.
It's
we talked about this is a blessing in discise for the NBA because they always wanted to start the season in December, right?
I think
the NBA knows that they're going to go up against they're more organized than all the other leagues, and they're like, oh, we just got to buy our time and then blow everybody else out of the water when we have to. I think they probably already have the solution secretly, but who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that this is lingering more so for the fact that they're looking at numbers for the future and how this can change the future and how they like it, actually. So that's why they're really, really holding on to this. Because I think Adam Silver's a pretty clear-cut guy. Like, he's optimistic and he's innovative and stuff. But I think if he genuinely believed it wasn't safe or this was a bad idea at all, then he would be like, it's over, But
yeah, and I think that's my fallback saving grace is I don't distrust Adam Silver. Like, I really think that Adam Silver has the thoughtfulness of the players, and also he might be getting a side check from LeBron from time to time. So I just feel like
you're making this like an MJ Stern situation all over again.
Yo, if you're trying to tell me LeBron 15s didn't show up on Adam Silver's doorstep with a nice little colorway, you're crazy.
Adam Silver have kids? Do we know if Adam Silver has kids?
If he does, they're wearing Jordans or LeBron. Sorry,
LeBron. I was gonna say
they're decked out in LeBrons.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, what are you talking about? Of course.
Top down.
Which is, hey, that's what I'm not assuming anything, but I know that that Adam Silver has enough of enough friendly interactions with enough players that he's like, well, we'll make sure everybody's taken care of.
Right. Well, again, I think I said on the last podcast, but June 15th seems to be the tentative deadline in terms of, if we're going to have a season or not. And I don't know. It's
still
weird.
A ways away.
We come every week, and sometimes we're pessimistic, sometimes we're optimistic. But I'd say, given the last 2 weeks, it seems like something is going to come out of this, and we're probably going to have basketball in early July. So we'll see what happens. And I mean, hopefully something happens because we need content to talk about here on this podcast because unfortunately last night wrapped up the
great transition. Wow.
You like that? Nice. It wrapped up the Last Dance series. I don't even know how to start this conversation because obviously, overwhelming, met all of my expectations, and I had very, very high expectations for this series as a whole. But just the last 2 episodes, basically about Jordan's last season, right? We really, really get in the meat and potatoes of those the behind-the-scenes footage, the 500 hours of behind-the-scenes footage that the NBA had been sitting on for so long. We find out some of the things that the Bulls had to go go through in order to get through the series against the Pacers, the 2 series against the Jazz. So James and Gabe, I'll ask you the same question I asked after leading into this conversation. What was your takeaway from those last 2 episodes?
Gabe, you go ahead.
Oh, what a gentleman!
Oh shucks.
You know what? You know what's funny?
He just knows how to treat a guest.
I think he passed it off because every time I ask him this question, he pauses for like 2 minutes because he's like just trying to gather his.
He's like,
his
let
thoughts.
me just take it all in.
Let me take this question in.
How about you kick this one off?
You know what? You know what?
Yeah.
I will take it for a change. I just, for me, it was crazy to me. Over all of this is just like I continued to learn more things, and even watching this, just seeing Jordan on the piano, like the guy doesn't know how to play the piano, but just to see that interaction with all these guys, I don't even know how they had access to the hotel room. Like these guys show up in their jerseys and shorts, like they didn't even have time to change into proper attire. I assumed that there wasn't a post-game interview after. Like it was just
it didn't look
that
like
much. It was just that much pandemonium and chaos. Like these guys were like the fucking Beatles. Like it was just insane the level of celebrity that Jordan had carried, and it was just a summation of like how much of a social life that this guy didn't have and how much basketball was his life.
I would have to agree. It's hard for me because I think it was such expert storytelling that it's I tweeted. Well, hold on. I'm getting there. I'm rounding.
Here we go.
I was on Twitter and I tweeted that this is basically Space Jam for adults. Like it's this mythical man that we've idolized, and he's going up against all odds, all these monsters. I mean, the other players, and he's killing them anytime and it's this one-sided, well-articulated story with everybody's favorite characters. You know, like every person that you really like why is Justin Timberlake in this? Who knows? Why is Obama gets featured like 3 times and he just narrates at the end? He's like, well, an athlete today. Like, why is this so well done? And because Jordan is the benchmark, I think benchmark is even putting it lightly. He is always been the gold standard, but he was a monumental figure in sports, and that's putting it lightly. But he's a monumental figure in pop culture. And the way you can tell that story, you're never going to tell that story fairly. But the way they frame this, it's a little bit propaganda. This has been a 10-part series of Jordan propaganda, where like he was the best man and there was nobody else, and he never had any difficulties, and we are gonna pretend none of this other shit happened. And granted, it's fair because you're working on a documentary with somebody, and of course you're not going to highlight some of the things that are less than savory, like maybe him cheating on his wife. That being said, you skip all these things because you want to paint a very, very well done picture, because that's what we wanted to see. I didn't want to see a sad story about Jordan. As much as I really thought I didn't want to. I enjoyed being on Twitter and everybody's like, whoa, man, the mailman don't deliver on Sunday. Look at him. God, we all hate Karl. Like, I enjoyed the kind of, we all hold hands and sing Kumbaya to celebrate this mythical man and enjoy some of those things and all the cast of characters that come with it. That being said, it is still propaganda. It was 10 hours of legitimate bullshit every so often. I'm like, come on, really, come on.
Definitely at times, all right. Definitely at times you'll have that like hyperbole emphasized, maybe a little too much. But I don't know, man. I'm not all the way with you there, Gabe. I think that there was a ton of, again, overemphasized pieces, but the gist of it was well rounded, and I think he really was that out of world figure in life. You know what I mean? Like really, really, really was that massive, huge persona. I don't know if you want to push back on that too, but
I agree with Gabe when he says, good journalism is not one where you have to have approval from the subject, right? So It's no secret, right?
Yeah,
Jordan's
this is journalism, though.
Jordan's 2 friends are co-producers on this. Like, there's no question that some of this had to be run through him, right? But Jason Harris,
some? some of this had to be run through him.
Well, I'm sure a lot of it, but Jason Hare has gone on record, whether you want to believe him or not, he said he had to push on a lot of stuff that he wanted out there that, you know, that the other side didn't want. And he's like, I'm not doing my job as a filmmaker if I'm not telling the whole story. And for you to Gabe to say that, like, they didn't show some of his hardships, I mean, we got stuff in this documentary that I did not think was going to be talked about, right? Like the depths of the gambling, you know, his father, why he left. I mean, even Stern having to answer the question about, did you kick him out because, you know, you were punishing him? Like, is that why he left for baseball for a year and a half?
Okay.
And even like
dig our heels into this.
You know, the amount he treated his, like, how shitty of a teammate he was. I didn't expect it to go to that extent. How he blackballed Isaiah from the U.S. team, right? I mean, he denied being the ethos or the center of it. Like, it was clear that a lot of the players on that team didn't want him on the team. But and even him avoiding the politics, like, I didn't think that they would have that sort of stuff in this documentary.
I don't know. I'm going to go on a big left-hand tangent, and we're going to come back. Have you ever seen a 60-minute interview? Remember 60 Minutes used to be a journalistic documentary series or TV show. Yeah. And they used to ask some hard-hitting questions. That's called journalism. They asked Michael Jackson, how many surgeries did you have? And Michael Jackson said 3. And they said, well, we have records of 5. And that's called a rebuttal question. When somebody gives you an answer and it doesn't really wash, you rebut. Mm-hmm. And you dig into why their story doesn't make sense. When David Stern says, I never said any of that, this is time when you're like, well, when you told Allen Iverson that I'll kick you out of the league like I did MJ, what did you mean by that? This is called a rebuttal, when you dig in to somebody's bullshit story. I'm not saying David Stern's story is bullshit. I'm just saying there was a lot of room where you let somebody answer and wax poetic about their idea, and you never really dig in again. When he says to Gary Payton, when he looks at the video about Gary Payton, he's like, oh, I had no problem with the glove. And then you're like, well, the box score tells me that you had a little bit of a problem with the glove. Right. When he says, well, I had other things on my mind. It was Father's Day, which is very fair and absolutely, absolutely true. But you're like, well, the game before that, you had a little bit of trouble with that before. And the game before that, you had a little bit of trouble. So there's these things where you never offer. My problem with the documentary is they never, ever offer a true rebuttal to anybody's positive opinion. When it's a negative opinion about Jordan, there's like 6 guys that are like, that's bullshit. Oh my God, nah, that's crazy. Oh, this is what was really going on. But there's never really a true rebuttal. That's called the straw man argument, where they build up this fake argument on the side and they push it down just to make it look like they're doing a good job. Again, I did not want to watch the documentary where they actually dig deep into that. And interesting that you're probably going to see in the Lance Armstrong documentary and the Mark McGuire one where they're actually going to go dig deep. And in the Mark McGuire documentary, I foretell that they're going to shit all over Barry Bonds. Why? Because he's the one who didn't get caught with any of the roids. And you're going to see truly what happens when you don't have overview of actual documentary footage and when people actually get to dig their claws into you. I say all that to say this. When this is not journalism, let us wash that. Let us push this away from our mind. This is not journalism. It is art.
Well, you know, Bill Simmons coined it really well. He said it's documercial, right? Because that's what it is, right? Because
it's a commercial with really, really well done product placement, and the product is Jordan. This is brilliant, brilliant stuff. And again, this is beautiful storytelling. Putting again, these mythical people that we hold so dear in our life in pop culture, Dennis Rodman, Steve Kerr, like Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, the stuff that they really
I'm shocked Isaiah
you said Thomas,
Karl
Magic. No, I hate Karl. Ugh. But it's important because these are people who actually were important in the general storytelling of when you talk about the Jordan story. But again, when you have no rebuttal, it is just a very, very great story told by a hero. Come on.
My only argument to that, and even like the documercial thing, yes, it's an ad, and we're trying to promote the Jordan and the Last Dance, but so like take it back from the get-go, right? Because we all have been wondering what this footage is and want to see this footage. So we can't right away. We understand out of the gate that this footage was filmed of that team during this time when they were like the Beatles and they were the biggest thing and they were still competitive and still winning. So out the gate, like I appreciate the journalism aspect where you're upset with the non-rebuttal and the positivity. But when you have guys like Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and Barkley saying this motherfucker beat me up, there's no rebuttal, man. There's
facts,
none.
No facts. That's 100%
done.
Facts.
It's over.
Nah, you're right. You're right.
It's over.
I also think I think we also take for granted, because if you didn't grow up with Jordan, like Jordan was never this vulnerable. He never talked this much to the media. The fact that we got this much Jordan for him to talk about, the fact that he and Reinsdorf had never talked about, running it back for that 7th championship, him seeing that footage for the first time, like that's a documentary right there, because we're seeing genuinely his reaction to it and him saying like, it'll always be the biggest what if of my life.
I think it's moments like that that actually make this this goes from like a well-documented, piece to actually just as brilliant storytelling, where you give Jordan the rebuttal interview. They're like, well, this is what they said. And you're like, yeah, this is bullshit. That's fantastic. The things I carry problems with is now we're trying to say that Jordan was a good baseball player. And guys, give me a freaking break. I saw 6 articles on Twitter where they're like, here's why Jordan should have made the major leagues if it wasn't for the lockout. Are you 202 isn't getting nobody to the major leagues. I'm sorry. I don't care.
But
I don't care.
I'm glad we got to the root of this problem.
This is really, it's baseball.
It's baseball.
It set me off, guys.
Dude, but baseball is such a sport where experience is everything. And when you have a guy like Terry Francona, again, we're talking about these names that aren't just names. They're not just people that say a positive thing. Terry Francona is, come on, Gabe, just as well as I do, that is a legendary manager in the League of Baseball.
And what did he say? He
said with 1,500 at-bats, he could make the majors.
He could make the majors.
Could have.
Can you do me a favor? Gabe, can you grab your Yankees hat right now? Because this would make this argument so much better.
I'll be like Mike Francesca. Listen, let's be honest.
Before you say this,
okay, go ahead.
I think it's outrageous for you to not respect the athlete. Hold up. Solo athlete, athletic ability. For a guy like Michael Jordan to do what he did in basketball with more at-bats and more time in baseball, say like we're giving a guy like Tim Tebow that we're still freaking not even over yet.
We don't talk about
he could be a legitimate baseball player. I genuinely believe that Jordan could have, just because of athletic ability.
I believe 35. I'm not betting money on a 35-year-old guy who needs another 1,500 at-bats.
31.
So I'll be drafting a 32-year-old outfielder who needs another 1,500 at-bats. So
he can learn second base. Come on. What are we talking about? Dude, there's a way to figure guys out.
At second base, I'll put him at cutoff. I'll maybe put him at cutoff.
Straight up. So when it comes athletically speaking, from any athlete, from any coach's standpoint, right? You look at a player and you go, okay, this guy's got a ceiling, this guy's got a ceiling, this guy's got this guy's got that. Wherever Jordan was, however low he was in baseball, his ceiling was higher than everybody else's. And that's a fact. You know it was. Yes. Of course.
At 32 years old.
But of course.
He's baseball.
The top 3 athletes on planet Earth at this time.
So
of course his ceiling's higher.
How old's LeBron? 34?
Yes. Oh, in football, tomorrow. No. Oh, I'm with you. Tight end for the Cowboys tomorrow, starting. I promise. Promise.
Here's the thing. Let's just, you know what, I'll concede and say, who knows? 2 more seasons of baseball, Jordan comes into the MLB All-Star. Who knows? Sure, why not? But he'd still be batting, what, 230? I'm going to drop a 230 batter at 32 years old. Who's ever heard of this bullshit? Anyways, moving on. Let's say that happens, and we'll concede all of that. It's the retelling of the story. I've watched baseball on and off for years. I know enough about it that, talkable stuff. And I've watched basketball for many years. You're telling me if this guy's name was not Jordan, you're telling me we'd be talking about a 202 minor league AA baseball player? No, of course we wouldn't. If Deion Sanders bat 202, you think we'd be talking about him? Guess again. If Bo Jackson bat 202 in the minors, you think we'd be talking about him? Guess again. Because his brand is so big and magnetic, of course we're attracted to him. The fact he's even marginally good at anything else besides basketball, we're like, wow, people are always shocked at his press conferences. Wow, he's so articulate. Just because he's just better at it than everybody else. That is fair. That is fair. Nobody talks about the years of media training that Jordan had to undertake because Nike threw him into it, because that's what you do with a strong brand. You work on it. But let's not play coy here and think that if his name was not Jordan, Michael Jordan, we'd be fawning over this bullshit. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. It's bullshit.
Well, you bring up a good point because, I mean, Jordan's a golfer, but he never shows up to like these celebrity golf tournaments or anything like that because he knows he won't be the best player on the course, right?
Because it requires less about athletic ability in that sport, and he knows that as well. Baseball is something that you can actually have a physical advantage over somebody else.
All right. Well, we'll do a one-off podcast. We'll do this is 80. We'll do an 80.5 for just this conversation at some point. But we need to get back to the doc for a second here. So the episode 9 leads off with the Pacers and Bulls, right? We get a small tease of it towards the end of the last episode, I can't even do my math at this point. Number 8. Yeah, at the tail end of 8 going into 9. And we get a lot of Reggie Miller. And here's another guy that I quickly realized has aged really, really well. Is like he does not look a day over whatever he was in his prime playing basketball as well. But we see that Reggie equally as competitive. Jordan feels that this team is as good, if not better, than this Bulls team. Is there anything in particular that you guys remember about this Pacers team, or just even this series at all? Besides the push-off?
The push-off. Well, I remember that Reggie Miller's of the generation of guys just below Jordan. So they see the highlights, they understand who he is, but they're not as afraid of him because they haven't had to face him one-on-one in prime time as much as the other guys. So this is where you start to see chips on their shoulder where they're like, nah, I ain't afraid of him. Who cares? Y'all are afraid of him because you're beaten. Your guys are beaten to death, and that's not going to happen to me. And then you start to see this is what happens, and you start to see the facade of Michael get built up again because you see guys who aren't afraid of him and they're still getting whooped, and that's exciting to see. And you see again, Miller is no joke. Let's not pretend here, but he's no joke because he has the same kind of killer instinct, and that's always an important factor when you're facing Jordan. You can't be afraid of him.
Just like the ruthlessness that Reggie had. That's all I remember. I was a fan of him just because of the confidence and the aura the guy possessed, really.
Right. No, and he was fearless, right? Like at the end of the day, like he thought he could beat anyone. He obviously thought this team was built, and they were built really, really well, right? The Davis brothers, we talked about this in the last podcast. Rick Smith, Mark Jackson, Jalen Rose, young baby Jalen Rose, right? Like they definitely had the tools to beat him, and they had Larry Bird in his first season coaching. Like who better to play against the Bulls than the guy that's gone toe to toe with Jordan as well, right? And I mean, we get that amazing quote at the end of Game 7 where they run into each other, and he says, you bitch, fuck you, and he's like, go work on that golf game of yours, and that just gives another classic moment.
I like the scene where they shoot the jumper and everybody's celebrating in Pacer Stadium and Larry's just stone faced. Just like
yeah.
Now we pissed off Mike. Look what you guys done.
No, it's just like 'cause he knows better, right? He knows that this is not the way you should be celebrating this early. There's still enough time. Just the same way as you give Brady or Breeze or any of these guys a minute left on the clock. There's just no. You haven't won anything yet.
Question to the podcast.
Yeah.
Over under on Larry Bird being a good coach. Cut or uncut.
Define good though. What do you want to say good is?
Would suggest that
fine,
he was a good coach.
Listen, I'm just asking the question whether you guys want to mince words on this. I was just curious to see if
it is very rare for an ex-player to come in, especially a player of his magnitude, right? Like I mean, we see how Wayne Gretzky in hockey, like he wasn't able to successfully convert into a coach. But I mean, his record would suggest that Larry Bird wasn't bad coach, and he was a good GM too.
I don't know. I bet you he was worse than he was probably perceived as, just because of the quality of team he had. Again, just like it's just very difficult when you're the greatest at something to try and teach it to other people.
You can't. Go ahead.
Yeah. Like we said with Wayne Gretzky, I don't know if Wayne Gretzky would be a good coach. I don't think some of these guys, like these legends in all these sports, are going to be able to, be a legitimate, genuinely good coach. So for Larry Bird to do that, I think he had this chance, but if he was a legit good coach, he would have coached for longer, no?
Correct. Bingo.
So
I'm of the school of thought of once you're good at something, like once you've reached mastery at a level of which that you necessarily don't have to kind of grind at it. it's very hard for you to teach people.
But
Yeah.
I also
perspective.
wonder if health was a part of it, right? He had a chronic back injury, right? Like he had a history of having back injury, and we've kind of seen what's that's done to Steve Kerr, right? Like he can barely stand up for these games. I mean, Phil Jackson's another example of it. And then he was offered the GM position where, you know, he's just pushing pen and making decisions from the comfort of his own desk. So I don't know if that was maybe more appealing to him.
Could be, exactly. But I think, you know, Phil is proof that, you know, if they want you bad enough, they'll put down the money for it and you'll show up. So that's
right.
I don't know.
That's very true.
Show up and show up only.
So they get past the Pacers in that the 97 finals, then that leads to a rematch with the Bulls. But then we cut back. I mean, a rematch with the Jazz. Sorry. So then we cut back to the first meeting with the Jazz, and we get I mean, if you don't know, Stockton and Malone, you know, greatest pick and roll, and I don't think anyone's ever going to perfect the pick and roll sort of to the extent that they did. What I did find interesting was I talked about this on the last podcast, James. We didn't think we were going to see Malone for sure. We didn't think we were going to see Stockton. And I found it really refreshing that Stockton did participate in this. And I actually read that he was the last person to agree. Like he was very, very reluctant to participate in this. And you see it because none of the other Jazz teammates, Jerry Sloan, none of these guys had participated in this documentary.
Yeah, and John was the first one that kind of goes against my point where all these legends are saying how good this guy was, you know? Because John kind of, not against my point, but John kind of just said, yeah, like we knew he was Jordan and shit, but like I'm trying to beat this guy. Like I don't know, who cares? I don't even fucking like whatever. I'm trying to win. So John was a cool little like different perspective where he wasn't fangirling over anybody. He wasn't impressed by, you know, he was just like, yeah, we had a hard fought. And that was it.
Well, and people forget that John Stockton was not like this guy was in your shoes. Like he was a shit disturber, pushing guys. He was a very dirty player, but he still respected.
Karl Malone, I think you're doing John Stockton a little bit more of a disservice than John wasn't hated that much. Karl Malone was the hated
No,
guy.
a lot of readings that I've done, like a lot of people didn't like playing against John Stockton because they found him to be dirty.
I think the whole team played dirty.
Yeah.
And I would like to reiterate how we did not talk about how dirty they played, but they talked about how dirty the Detroit Pistons played. Again.
But you can't compare the two. No, the Pistons are way dirtier than the Jazz were.
One team had the phrase "bad boys" in front of them. The other one didn't. That's my argument.
Karl Malone is still ostracized in the NBA to this day. Nobody likes him.
Yeah.
There's a reason.
But that's a lot of off-court stuff. And you know what? The more I read into it, I was like, I understand why Karl Malone didn't participate in this. Because,
man. Oh my goodness.
Once Karl Malone came up in the 9th episode, like Twitter was blowing up about, you know, unfortunately his not allegations, but the shitty things that he did, you know, when he was in college and impregnant a 13-year-old, if you don't know.
But to also like say like, I think he showed a good sportsmanship, at least some respect, hopping on that bus after that loss and being like, "What's up, Jordan? Congrats!" and that. No,
right? I think it's still enough where there's still some sort of mutual respect. And you know what I love about John Stockton, what I love about the whole documentary is when you see these guys age, is you see how they've aged into like mild-mannered citizens and not like titans of the court.
Right.
Like Bill Cartwright always looks like an English teacher to me. Like he always gets like, well, you know, basketball's crazy. And then John Stockton looks like a vice principal. Like it's just all hilarious to see these guys look like real scrappy guys on the court, and then they get older. They're like, well, you know, the game of basketball is always something to marvel at. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Why is this guy talking like this? But it's, I mean, again, John Stockton did a decent job of not fangirling, but doing enough of a service to be like, well, I wasn't afraid of him. But I wanted
the first time John Paxson hopped on there, I thought we were going to get a reading from the Bible on the first Sunday there.
Can I talk to you about Jesus?
Talk about our Lord and Savior.
Yeah, your Lord and Savior. So, you know, the first meeting where we find out, you know, a part of Jordan's motivation, obviously trying to use anything that he can. You know, Karl Malone wins MVP that year, so Jordan uses that. He doesn't think that Karl's not deserving, but he thought he was more deserving of the MVP. And we also find out that Byron Russell, you know, when Jordan quit, he asked him why he quit, right? And kind of got under his skin, right? And he also, you know, referred to him as this kid. And, you know, Karl and John and all these guys are like, you know better, like you shouldn't be saying shit to Jordan. And then we find out about the infamous flu game, which is now called the food poisoning game.
The other Pizzagate?
The other Pizzagate. So Jordan sitting in his Marriott hotel with his trainer, Tim Grover, and some other personnel, probably security as well. 5 guys show up to deliver pizza. And, the storytelling by Tim Grover is really, really well done because it starts to, put these conspiracies in your head. Was this pizza tainted with? Why 4 people show up? Why 5 people show up with it? Propaganda. I don't like that I'm feeding into this, but I read an interesting story. The director Jason Hare had said that behind the scenes he was told that a lot of these guys had dinner prior to, right? This is 11 o'clock at night. They didn't want to wait for Jordan for dinner, so Jordan hadn't been fed, and so Jordan's like, I need food, so they order pizza. They're just outside of Utah, so it's a very, very small city. And as the pizza shows up, and Tim Grover says, I don't trust this pizza, which I don't know why. Like, obviously, again, feeding into the propaganda, if that's what you want to call it.
Propaganda.
But an interesting story is a lot of people are like, if a pizza shows up at 11 a.m., and I'm sure you guys have been in this situation as well, like no one's turning down a pizza at 11. Like everyone is eating a pizza if it's at 11. But apparently Jordan was so pissed off that these guys had not waited for him to eat dinner that he actually spit on the pizza to make sure that nobody else had ate the pizza.
I don't know, man. That's all cool. I don't even know what you just said to me, but to be honest. But for me, for me, Grover's telling you this story and he's trying to make you believe like this is, these guys are trying to fuck with us and screw us over. Hey, dude, you're a grown ass man. You got a pizza from 5 dudes at a door and gave it to Jordan? Whoa. We should stop 4 steps. What, are you stupid? Are you stupid?
Thank you.
I was almost like
all-star trainer, and you're telling me you're gonna open the door and 5 random dudes that look like the Sopranos are gonna be like, yeah, take this pizza, it's gonna be all right. And you're like, yeah, sure, here's the money. Hey, Jordan, I don't know about this pizza, but it's all you. Wait, I'm tossing the pizza out. I'm closing the door in their face. Get Uncle Gus to throw them out the building. What are we doing, dog? What is this?
Hey, 110%. And then also you say to Jordan, and I get you're Michael Jordan and a bigger life figure and shit, but if you're hungry right now, that's cool, man. Everywhere's closed, and I'm not trying to kill you tonight. So, like, we're gonna wait until breakfast tomorrow. What's wrong with you? Why is that even? How did that even happen?
You're telling me the team bus ain't got no Nutri-Grain bars? You're telling
something
me got
somewhere?
No
yeah. What do you mean?
Is
there not a fucking convenience store down the road? You can get a Fiber One and a Gatorade and call it a night. What the fuck?
Like, what are we doing? What are we doing?
Ordering mushroom pizza from 4 dudes out of a basement and feeding it to Jordan.
Also, is this not the first time you've ever heard of the pizza story before?
Mm-hmm. I've heard Tim Grover talk about it before. Like I've seen articles about it. It's been talked about several times.
But within this documentary era, like within the Jordan doc storytelling, I've never heard the pizza story last year, the year before. See,
I've heard it before. I've heard it before. Yeah.
The problem is too, Gabe, and like a fight on Jordan's side for this and the propaganda and such is that we're seeing how massive he was, how fucking colossal, and now all of the news feeds and all of the information coming out, really for the past 30 years, we don't even know if it's been real because no one's ever heard from Jordan. So this is kind of his first stance to be like, look,
yeah, that's true.
This is how I'm saying my fucking story, because you guys don't want to talk about my life for the 40 years, but this is how I'm going to set the record straight.
That's fair enough. I mean, you got to give him that for the most part.
Well,
exactly.
even his
pizza story is complete.
Well, even his mom. His mom acknowledges in a doc that like a lot of people thought that he was actually hungover, but like if you're curling up next to your toilet in a fetal position at 3 a.m., that's not. I mean, I've never been hungover, but it doesn't sound like a hangover to me. Like it could be that bad.
I mean, usually it's later than 3 a.m., but
I don't know when he started drinking.
Well, so Jalen Jacoby made a good point that if you're going to combine pizza with cigars and beers, like that's never a recipe for a good time.
That's
either.
not gonna listen. When you're smoking a cigar and you're drinking beer, some days you can do 12, and some days that second one is going to hit you a little differently. And maybe with the bad pizza, and he's puffing these cigars down like it's nobody's business, it hits the wrong way. I don't think, have you ever gotten a cigar in Utah? I don't think it's exactly high quality stuff.
Now, watching Jordan go through that game, like, do you think a part of his mindset and mentality to get through that game was because, like, he called out Pippen for not playing through the migraine game?
It may have been. I don't know if he's the kind of guy that thinks that much, and the more you watch him, the more info we get to him outside of it, he talks about just being in the moment all the time. I don't know,
Mhm.
man. I don't even know if he ever even thought about anybody else as far as that goes. Like, he's just going out there like, listen,
Yeah.
I'm the best player. I got to be the best today, no matter what. Again, so I'm going to do it.
I think he was probably so pumped full of adrenaline. Like, I think he was like, I see this from a lot of guys who are also stand-up comedians, and a lot of guys who are like track athletes and whatnot, that they're like right before they need to do something, they're like falling over. They're like, man, I can't see straight. Da, 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 da. This is terrible. But right when it's like, on your marks, they're like, oh, lights are on, the crowd's full, it's time to party. And as soon as they cross the tape, they're like, oh God, I can't breathe, I can't see. And sometimes you can just isolate your adrenaline for a moment to be like, I need to do these 8 things. I need to do these 3 things. And Jordan seems like the type of guy to just turn on the adrenaline when he needs to and then turn it off when he doesn't need to.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about winners and losers later, and I was just thinking that every time Jordan went to the bench, like, he always had that green cup of Gatorade, and he was just sipping it, on all those downtime time plays to recover, quote unquote. So I was just thinking, like, yeah, Gatorade must be loving this right now.
Oh,
Well,
quiet sponsors.
that speaks to like a bigger point, and what they talk about at the end, and how, like, I don't know if we all acknowledged even at the time how culturally he really changed sports, like, globally. And not necessarily just him, but that Bulls team itself really just changed what we're experiencing now in today's game, and how that's still further
Monumental.
It's
Right.
very, very interesting to look at and kind of deduct back down to then,
Well, I think David Stern said it. Maybe he said it towards the end of the documentary, but he said something. I don't know the number, but he's like, when this thing started with Jordan, we were airing in 25 countries, and by the time we got to the end of this, it was like 200 and something odd countries. So
Yeah.
I mean, it just shows, the global
It's nuts.
impact that he had, right? So then this kind of segues into the whole Kerr thing, right? Before this documentary, I've always been a fan of Steve Kerr as a person, as a personality, right?
Same.
Whether it was as a player, I really fell in love with him when he was the broadcaster. Like, I thought he was the perfect, like, play-by-play guy. But then we kind of get into, the deep dive of his stories, and I'm sure a lot of people were watching this and they were probably wondering, like, why are we getting into Steve Kerr? But he was monumental, as Paxton was, back in the early 90s, of hitting those sort of big shots. And I just love the cutaway of him hitting all those shots. Kind of reminded me sort of like Van Fleet last year during the Raptors playoff run. I didn't know the story about his father. Like, I knew that his father had died. I didn't realize that it was in Beirut, and circumstances over there, and him being American and getting killed that way. I think the thing that really resonated with, not resonated, but the thing that really hit me is, he said that every time, the national anthem was being played, he thought about his father, and it kind of foreshadows and shows why he's so strong about politics, and why he's always trying to make his voice heard. I mean that's one thing that's kind of been obvious in the last couple of years. Your thoughts on Steve Kerr?
I've always been a huge Kerr guy. I've never thought I still think he hasn't got enough credit as a coach either to this day. I think he deserves so much more credit as a coach. But I think what I kind of liked was we kind of brought that resemblance from Steve Kerr and Phil Jackson almost, And although that they're two very, very different human beings, the whole story behind Steve Kerr's family and what his dad was trying to do, and how he was, the right things were in mind, the right intentions were in mind. You kind of saw that little bit of resemblance of, like, both these guys are a bit out there, but they're very strong in their beliefs, And it was a different level of respect that I gained that I already have for the guy as well. I already think he's a better president candidate than they have going on right now for both sides. But I think he was a very cool person to kind of dive into and get a bit more credit, because someone that definitely deserves it.
Accurate. I mean, I love Steve Kerr. I love him to death. I love him as a coach. I love him as a broadcaster. I'm like iffy on him as a player. Like, I like him, but I just feel like we overhype him a little bit. I mean, he was great, but so was John Paxson, and so was a whole bunch of other. Anyways, beside the point. That being said, I loved how they highlighted him, and I think it's a great testament to, and it brings a greater perspective for him in his coaching philosophy. It's about perspective. It's about all perspectives matter, all ideas matter, and you got to weigh everything in a certain balance. And again, somebody online was like, well, if you didn't see Steve Kerr's story about his dad, then you'd be less sorry for all these players who are kneeling during the anthem. And somebody's like, well, here's what he says about people kneeling during the anthem. And he has this great locker room interview where he's like, you're allowed to kneel. That's the point of the flag. It's a symbol of freedom. And I was like, well, there you go. And And his mom is actually if you've never seen an interview with his mom's an absolute gem.
Oh, she like a big winner from this stock too, right? Just
huge, absolutely huge. So I mean, Steve's a great guy, and I think it even says more like the kind of streamline to this documentary is, even though there's a number of people who are gifted athletes, physically gifted athletes, there's a stronger conversation about some athletes who don't have a conventional route to the big leagues. Guys like Dennis, guys like Steve, who kind of just have to work and grind to figure out a way to get great. And then even when you're there, you still kind of have to figure out a way to continue to sharpen that blade. And Steve's a great example of that. And it speaks volumes to him, not only him as a player, but him as a coach right now as well.
Yeah, and you make a great point, because he was only given one scholarship from Arizona, and Arizona has like breeded and is kind of the pedigree of great point guards. So like even when he was playing there, like it wasn't going to be an easy route for him, right? Like almost like Steve Nash going to this, it was Santa Clara, right? And that was the only offer that he was given as well. But it does show that not everyone's path can be as glamorous. There's definitely a hard road to get there. And I mean, 5 rings as a player, 3 as a coach. He was a player of the 72 win team. He was a coach of the 73 win team. And I didn't know this, but he has the highest career 3-point percentage in NBA history. So I mean, pretty stacked resume to say the least.
I thought it was pretty funny the one clip. It's like late in the 4th or whatever, and they're like, Steve Kerr hits his second 3 of the game, and I was like, second? Oh. That's weird. Like I'm confused. Did he take? How many has he taken? It's probably like 4, right? Like who knows? That's just how the game was played back then. But you hear 2, and you're like, good 3-point shooter, 2 threes. We're in the 4th quarter. This isn't right.
Yeah, the game's played so differently where they're like threes. Never heard of them. You do threes like you're dunking, like sporadically throughout the game.
How about a 54-point performance?
Wild.
Teams are putting 54 up halfway through a second now.
Yeah.
Halfway through the second, teams are hitting 54.
I forgot about the second quarter. That. All right, leaving the game.
Dude,
54 points. Yeah, I'm
54 points to finish a basketball game. That's never going to be beat.
No,
never going to be beat.
I think the closest that could have happened is when the Spurs and the Pistons used to play in those finals, right? They were always like in the low 70s. But 54 is just defense, absurd. Yeah, like it's you're nuts. Right. That's like a first quarter stat. So we get the shot of Kerr kind of as he says bails out Michael Jordan at that rally, and I think that quote never gets old, right?
Yeah, I think right then you're like, oh, this guy is made for this. You're like, he's made for something like this.
He was going to have like an extended career beyond that, right? Because his storytelling ability was just phenomenal.
I don't know, guys. Mike's like, I don't know, guys. I'm a little more shaky on this shot. Maybe we should give it to Steve. All right, I got to bail Mike again.
Yeah.
It was perfect. It was flawless.
Oh, great storytelling.
Life took on, for him beyond the basketball court after he sort of kind of said that. And then he'd go on to win the Spurs and whatnot and the Warriors, and the rest is sort of history.
How many chips does he have with the Spurs?
He has 5 in total, so he probably has 2 with the Spurs then, right? Because he had
well-decorated. That's a well-decorated member of the NBA.
Oh, yes.
Oh, well, I mean, if you look at his success and you want to tie it back, you look at his web. Like, I mean, he's under Popovich, he's under Phil Jackson. Like
that's what I was going to say.
The tutelage is insane.
When you get endorsed by Popovich and Phil Jackson, okay, it's over.
And Michael Jordan and Tim Duncan and David Robinson, like
if you got to coach Tim Duncan, that's already something that you're like, well, I'm coaching the weirdest athlete of all time. And then on top of that, the toughest guy of all time, Mike Jordan, punches you in the face, like, no, but he didn't deserve it. He was a great guy. I'm like, well, you're just the guy. You've hit all spectrum points.
Right. So then we get into episode 10. We get into the 98 finals. And this is kind of like, I mean, I can't imagine this series during, social media time with Rodman getting away. We finally see the kids. I mean, it was refreshing to see the kids talk about Michael and talking about Utah. Do you have any thoughts about that Utah crowd there, James? Or even Gabe, for that matter?
I mean, we still see it today, dude.
Exactly.
Chris Paul, Donovan Mitchell. Those are stories in the past couple of years.
Russell Westbrook.
But and there's two
me, guys. Racism. Come on. Come on.
James wasn't going to be the guy to say it.
Come on. What are we seeing in these crowds? It's racism. That's what we're seeing.
Hey, their favorite player was Karl Malone. So you relax. A little bit.
I don't know if you know Karl Malone, but I don't know if we claim him either.
The black kid.
That's not our guy.
It's so funny because if you watch that Inside the Stuff reunion they had, like you just see Karl Malone on this massive couch and he just has like all these animals hung up on his wall and he's just smoking a cigar and it's just like the most like not black guy that you possibly imagine.
He wears cowboy hats like unironically, like that's just weird.
Yeah, but yeah. We get in that episode, you know, the Jazz got home court advantage. And the interesting thing is, you remember when we cut, I don't know if it was episode 5 or 6, right before the All-Star break, but the Bulls blew that 23-point lead against the Jazz, and the Jazz end up winning, and then they go into MSG, and then we kind of get the Kobe story. Like, that game actually ended up playing a big factor because the Jazz had a 1-game lead on the Bulls and ended up having home court advantage for these NBA finals as well. The other interesting thing I was thinking is if the Pacers had won that game 7, imagine how much of an NBA nightmare would have been to try to sell a Pacers Jazz finals.
Indiana Utah finals.
Yeah, like nobody's watched. Like you're talking about like two like the smallest markets in the NBA at that time, especially in the 90s.
You're telling me I had to watch Karl Malone and Miller as like the 2 stars?
Yeah.
Hey, that's a tough sell.
Which is exactly why we know Stern didn't boot Jordan out of the league. Right there.
Well played, full circle. Full circle. But yeah, we get into that, and then we find out, you know, Rodman after game 3 decides to dish for the WCW and pursue his wrestling dreams, as he calls it. Shows up on Nitro, doesn't show up for the practice. What I found interesting was like the Bulls' reaction was really like pretty calm and cool. Like it seemed like the media was making it bigger than that the Bulls actually really cared about it because they just knew Dennis at this point in his process.
That's the Phil Jackson effect, though, dude, right there. That's the Phil Jackson effect, and maybe one other guy can do it, and that's probably Steve Kerr, just from having lived through it. But that's it. The only like it's to have that team be able just to allow that to happen. People are flying around. All these guys are moving pieces. Phil Jackson was just the lock, man. The lock.
Phil's like, listen, he's not in Vegas, so as far as I know, he's doing pretty okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's also jeopardizing his body and possibly getting hurt by showing up to a wrestling show.
It's Phil. Phil knows.
I mean, as much as we want to believe that wrestling is fake, right?
Phil just knows, man. Phil knows.
Yeah. But what was interesting is Rodman ended up getting fined $20,000, right? He didn't get punished by the team at all, didn't miss any games, but he got paid $250,000 by the WCW and got a private jet. So I mean, it was kind of a smart business move if you look at it.
Hey, dude, if you're looking for someone to shit on Rodman, you ain't gonna find it over here. I'm a fan.
I'm looking for some. I'm fishing right now, but he ended up getting $1 million for participating in the pay-per-view Bash at the Beach, where he actually fought Karl Malone. Like that's a part of the documentary we didn't see as well, right?
I call that checkmate. I don't know what you're calling over there. I call that checkmate.
Well, the fact that Rodman showed up and hit the 2 biggest free throws in Game 4 after all of that, right? And he won a championship, ended with Carmen Electra, right? Like Rodman's a goat.
Guys. I don't know if you know how checkmate works, but it's multiple pieces cornering another piece, and the game's done.
Right.
Checkmate.
I agree. Him hitting that jump shot on Karl Malone for me was the icing on the cake, and I was good. The Dennis Rodman jersey's in the mail right now. It's on the way. I'm
oh, in the mail. I see what you did there, James. Karl Malone mail. Yeah, well done. Wow.
Forget Kerr. James is shooting crazy from beyond the arc.
So this takes us to Game 6, obviously the game that is cemented in history, one of the greatest 42 seconds in NBA history. We see that, Pippen gets stiffness in his back. There's flashbacks of the migraine game again, and Pippen possibly quitting on himself. And I said this in the last episode, James, with you. Like, I was concerned that Pippen would kind of be shown in sort of like a negative light and he'd kind of be a loser of this talk. But it kind of, in this last episode, has really, really come out of the winner. Comes back, ends up playing in that second half. I think he has one of the greatest quotes in this documentary when, they ask him, what were your thoughts when you saw Jordan dribble out the court? He's like, just get the fuck out of the way.
It's the same thing that Rodman said, too. He's like, I knew he was going to shoot that thing. He wasn't passing that.
Yeah. He's like, he knew it wasn't going to
be Paxson.
Yeah, I just took the words right out of my mouth. But we see this, and then we see, the slight shove, and I think Bob Costas put it the best. I had the quote here somewhere. He's like, it was kind of like reminiscent of you pushing the matador out of the way right before being served.
Hold up, where are we on this? You guys think that was a shove?
I don't think it was a shove. Like you said, his momentum
Gabe's giving
was
me a
going
look
that
over
way.
here.
I mean, it wasn't not a shove. They put let's be honest. He put him on skates, but he put him on skates and made sure he was well out of the way. Like
you know what? I thought it was like a full circle sort of moment because he was the one that was pushed when Reggie Miller got that open shot, and it was kind of almost like a makeup in a way.
Yeah, but we're not looking at the actual specific points of the game. Like in that fourth quarter, I'm sure Jordan drove by him a couple times previous, got to the hoop. So the next time we took that one initial footstep, like this guy's busting ass to get to the net.
Well, he also even talked about how Russell played defense on the point of his toes, right? So I'm sure he took advantage of that as well, right?
I don't think there was no shove. To me, that was nice.
You saw the hand. Listen, there's a great moment in soccer.
The only hand I saw is when he raised it and he hit the shot, okay?
Mm-hmm. 2 fingers fall through.
Right.
Nah, I mean, I wouldn't call it a shove, but there was definitely a little bit more pressure than people were leading on. Come on.
Mm-hmm. I think he beat him too bad anyways.
Hold on. Let's reverse this.
Yeah.
If somebody did the same thing to Jordan, you think Jordan would be like, no, it wasn't a shove? You think you know for a goddamn fact that Jordan would be sitting in that chair and be like, it was a shove. I got pushed out of the way.
He didn't say it about the Reggie thing.
I was just going to say the same thing.
He didn't say it about Reggie, so he had his chance. He had his chance. I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought Reggie's was worse too, but whatever.
Oh,
Reggie's was no, but Reggie said. Reggie even said, like, give them a reason to make the call, right? Like, he was always just fishing in those final minutes to get a call.
Reggie ran a tight end route into contact and made the pass. That's insane.
But if you watch basketball today, even on inbounds plays, push-offs are far more reluctant to let go. Like push-offs on inbounds, right? Because he's not holding the ball. He wasn't dribbling and then pushed off. He was trying to get the basketball. So those ones are, I think, even today probably still pass.
I don't know, man. He lowered his shoulder into Jordan. He ran into contact and made the pass. I mean, listen. Again, the 90s basketball is nothing to be compared with today. It'd be very hard to make these types of comparisons because the refs were half blind half the time.
Yeah. So then, they win. We get that footage in the hotel room, right? Him playing the piano. Sorry, I have to mention Leo, all right? The man in the iron face is what he called it, right?
The iron face.
That was awesome. Like I thought Leo was definitely a big winner, right? Kind of just show up, like it just shows the level of celebrity of, like, he just came off the heels of Titanic, I believe, and then he made Man in the Iron Mask, and then Jordan sort of having that sort of moment. But there's no questions about Leo being. I mean, you probably would have preferred to see Leo than Justin Timberlake in this doc, eh?
100,000%. Is that even what? We still haven't. Nobody's ever answered to me what Justin Timberlake's doing in this doc.
I think it was just more of a pop culture thing. Like,
and he's sponsored by Jordan.
I know he's a Jordan guy too. Timberlake is sponsored by Jordan as well.
Yeah.
Jordan ad. Give me a frick.
Yeah. Sponsored by Jordan. Well, he has those Levi Jordans for all the white Jordan fans out there. You know,
the white Jordan fans.
Remember, guys. Propaganda.
But the series ends on the ultimate what if, right? We finally hear from Jerry Reinsdorf and their mentality behind not bringing this team together. He does say that, he did put the offer on the table for Phil, but obviously at this point, the relationship between Jerry Krause and Phil Jackson is just so tainted at this point and just so destroyed. And Phil knew what this would have done to Jerry if, Phil had come back for a seventh season, a seventh run at this for this Bulls team. The interesting thing is, like, the NBA went into a lockout this year, so a lot of people talk about this team being really old. Rodman wouldn't have been the same, but this also would have been a shortened season, and would that been a beneficiary to the Bulls? I do want to point out in this lockout season, they had to cram 50 games into 3 months, right? This is a year that we saw an 8-seed Knicks team go to the NBA Finals. So it kind of almost benefited the younger teams, right? Kind of almost like when the Heat had won in that shortened season against the Spurs, right? We all thought that this would be beneficiary to the Heat as well. Your thoughts on the Bulls possibly winning a 7th championship and being kind of sort of one of the biggest what ifs in sports history?
Well, so they do the thing, right, where they say they give it to Phil and then Phil's choice. If you want to come back to coach, we'll have you. Well, like again, the guy's too smart. The guy's too much of a guru. He knew it would probably be 3 times as hard the next time around. He knew that was what they've already done was what they've done, and he made the right decision by saying no to that. And then again, it makes no GM, like, again, in this time in basketball, how many 1-year deals are getting kicked out that much? Like, they're not really very many at this point, right? Because now today we get a ton. So for a GM to sign Pippen long term, Kerr long term, Rodman long term, it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. But Michael is absolutely 110% correct when he says, if you just all give us one year, we all come back. I think both sides are right, but sometimes it's kind of how the old cookie crumbles type situation, like contracts and all these salaries make problems. And then on top of that, when you have a GM that hates your head coach, you're kind of screwed.
Right.
Yeah.
And for him to even say it was more maddening for Jordan than satisfying to leave at his peak, right? Because a lot of people in the sports world would be like, sort of like Brady, like leave like Jordan did, get your championship and walk away from the game, right? A lot of people say that, but for Jordan, it's obviously given him sleepless nights knowing that he left at his peak.
Is there any great athlete that has ever left on their peak?
Ray Lewis.
No.
I mean, Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, that's a really good one. That is a good one. That is a really good one.
But like Jordan says that, it hurts. It's maddening. I was at my peak, but I just spent 9 episodes hearing how you were sick of all this shit. So I don't know, man. I don't know how much I believe you on that.
Right.
Theme for Propoganda. Today, boys.
I got it. But I with that being
I know
said,
what I'm putting in the header of the podcast.
with that being said, I do think they get a 7th if they all come back. I don't know. It's hard. It's obviously hypothetical, but it's hard to say they don't.
Like Jordan highlighted on the first 3 chips.
Can I quickly point something out before you get in your point too? The Spurs were the ones that end up winning, right? Young Timmy D and David Robinson did end up winning the championship under Greg Popovich, which would have been an amazing Phil Jackson versus
Phil
Greg
Jackson
Popovich.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, I would have loved to see it. I'm not saying I wouldn't have loved to see it. But that being said, again, it's still a very, very hard to make out because, Jordan highlights for the first 3 championships. He says once you climb those first 3 in your mind, it's very hard to even put it in your mind to be like, coming back for another one. You've come out in what you set out to accomplish. And then once you do that next 3, you're like, we're going back to back to back. You've climbed the mountain again. It's very hard for you to be like, no, we're going to do it one more time on top. I think maybe in hindsight, when you leave the party, you're like, man, I really wish I would have stayed. I would have stayed for one more song. No, once you leave, it's gone. It's in the past. You had your chance. You shot the shot. It's called The Last Dance, guys.
Right. That's 100% the situation. 100%, dude. This guy, he wasn't mad about it right after. He was cool for probably 4 years, chilling, cigars, all that. Now 10 years later, he's like, why'd they fucking make me quit on my top? Like that's how this is exactly what it looks.
I think it bothers him that he was like, man, when he went to go play for the Wizards, he was just like, well, I had like another good 1.5, 2 years in me that I could have made a run somewhere with a bunch of guys who we all played well. You can think about that in hindsight. But it's called hindsight. You don't know what all the extenuating factors are. It's a shortened season. You guys are old. You guys are tired. I shouldn't say old, but you guys are more labored. You're tired. You've run 3 full seasons hard. And for you to go against a David Robinson, Tim Duncan, Greg Popovich team, they're going to run into the wall too.
Not only 3, dude. You're 6 for 8.
Yeah.
6 for 8, bro. I'm tired. I'm tired. That's exhausting.
Go smoke cigars.
That's what I'm saying, dude. Play that piano.
Well, I'm glad that we wrapped that up. I mean, there's always a conversation if Jordan was just curious about, could he have been the only player to win 4 in a row as well, right? Like, that's another conversation as well. Like, would he have used that as an excuse to? But, I mean, again, like you said, hindsight is a key word here, right? Like, it's just a lot of.
On Twitter, somebody raised a good issue. If Jordan wins 7, do we talk about him any differently? The answer is no.
That is a really, really good point.
I'm not going to be like, well, man, between 6 and 7, let me tell you, it changed the whole conversation. No, Jordan's still Jordan. I even wager if Jordan won 5, we'd still be talking about him in the same way. But I know 2-3-peats sound better.
Yeah.
But 7 is not going to change my conversation towards him.
All right. Well, let's land this because I gave you a little homework. All right. We'll talk about our winners and losers, and I told you to try to have some fun with this. So we'll kind of go around the table here. We'll start with you, Gabe. We'll start with the winners. Who do you think some of the winners of this documentary are?
Winners, B.J. Armstrong's aging theory. I don't know what he's up to, but he's aging like fine wine.
Right.
Whoever has stock in cigars, good job.
Yeah, I have that as one too.
Oh my goodness. Beers after a game, great. Gatorade got encroached territory now because a whole bunch of Busch beers being drunk after games, Miller Lite.
Right.
But besides the jokey joke, guys who walk away winning clearly is Jordan. Jordan overhyped this and saying they're gonna, you guys are gonna hate me after this, and oh my goodness, and I'm the terrible guy, and it's this bad PR for me in this documentary, which is bullshit. We all walk away thinking Jordan is whatever GOAT conversation there was, it's absolved now because Jordan increases his standing tenfold just by theory of hard work. But my personal winner, my number 1 seed winner is Phil Jackson. I think Phil Jackson walks away being, I have a better appreciation as a guy who coached for years. I love the idea of coaching, the theory of coaching, and just being able to handle these big egos in one place was a high skill to hone. But being able to hone these type of guys for this long, and we don't even really get to talk about him going to LA and taking on the another 2 biggest personalities in the NBA again, that is magical stuff. And again, the 2 episodes, the episode and a half of Phil going to Puerto Rico and Phil taking acid in LA, I love him to death.
Well, I think especially considering his last stint in New York, a lot of younger fans will probably think of that. And,
He's a
what was the word that he used? Like, it was like hoodlum or something like that. And obviously kind of stirred the NBA to its core. LeBron James I can't remember the word. It was like a word that you should be using in 2020. But he, choice of words, and, he got paid this a substantial contract that I'm sure he really didn't want to do this gig. And, but the money, like, again, James had pointed out earlier, you give him a blank check and he's going to take it, right? So you make a really good point about that. James, some of your winners?
Yeah, big winner for me is baggy suits and all those stores that are trying to get rid of them. Anyone trying to get rid of that baggy tuxedo, this is your chance.
JJ Watt had the best tweet last night. He's like, so who's going to be the first to bring back the baggy suits?
That's it, bro. I'm telling you, the biggest winner is those stores that have that surplus stock in the back of these baggy ass suits. They're gone by next week, I promise.
Number 1 draft pick, baggy suits. Give me the Steve Harvey collection for $300.
No, I think for me, my biggest winner, of course, was Jordan. He, in my eyes, is now the GOAT. He is the greatest. I don't think LeBron can touch him. I don't think it's comparable anyways. We always talk about that, but I do believe that Jordan is the best basketball player to ever grace the court, and I firmly believe that now. Phil Jackson is a winner for me as well. I firmly believe that he is the best coach in sports, I think. One of the most interesting men alive still, and still my number 1 go have a beer with kind of guy.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Steve Kerr's a winner too, man. I and it was late, which is good because he won late at the end where everyone's seen. So now we're going to talk about his episode for a little bit longer now. And then when the NBA comes back, he might have a little bit more of a storyline as well. I think he's going to be a big winner. And I think Scottie Pippen too, man. I think when it comes down to legitimate athletes that cared about their teammates and really, like, at the end of the day, just wanted to win and perform, and didn't matter his role. He didn't really talk much. Didn't, aside from all the complaints that were like major things, he was never complaining on a daily basis. Showed up to work, worked with Jordan, was always Robin, and he was the best at that anyone has done. I
agree.
So you guys pointed out the obvious ones. I think I had a lot more fun with this than you guys did. But some of the people I had, first the ESPN team as a whole, right, to be able to push this from a July release date to now, to feed into our quarantine needs right now. Just an absolute job by that entire team. Like they finished the last episode on Thursday, which again, like I have the experience, like just to edit from different houses and to run edits and send Dropbox links. Like I just can't imagining how maddening that experience was. So obviously ESPN a big winner. The music composers, I mean, Gabe and I have talked to like the umpteen amount, right?
Music cues, the
music
cues.
The commercial music, the documentary music, like everything was just on point in terms of just some of those finer details. And speaking of music, one of the big winners has to be Kenny Lattimore. I'm sure his Spotify streams and downloads must have skyrocketed last night. You know, in '98, he sent to MJ the advanced copy of his album and "Soul from a Man," in case you're curious. I'm a fan of R&B, and I've never heard of Kenny Lattimore before, so I'm definitely gonna be.
I don't know if you guys, for the listeners, I don't know if you know who Kenny Lattimore is, but if you ever listen to Kenny Lattimore, you're not doing this to Kenny Lattimore. Like, this is not the move. You're not bumping to Kenny Lattimore in your speakers.
I mean, hey, Gabe, propaganda. Propaganda.
I think the most hilarious thing is that he name drops Kenny Lattimore like I should be impressed.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Same.
Or Pac or Biggie or Jay-Z. Those would be interesting things. But my man's like, got that new Kenny Lattimore. You know, he's a close friend of mine. Yeah, who isn't a close friend of Kenny Lattimore? You should be.
Yeah.
The moment he said that he was a close friend of mine, I was like, I couldn't care less. I just didn't even.
There's a reason you're getting an advanced copy of this album. My number one seed for biggest winner of this documentary has to be Carmen Electra. Like I just started following her on Instagram, and I was just like, there's no way you had this many followers when this whole thing started. And the fact that she got cut early, she got a cameo in the last episode last night as well. And she has aged like fine wine. Let me tell you.
She's not an ugly woman, I'll tell you that. She's not an ugly woman.
So listen, I'm starting to think Dennis Rodman was okay with not scoring points because he was winning everywhere else in life, you know?
Would you say he was scoring points in other ways?
Points.
Let's get into the losers, the more fun conversation here. Gabe, your biggest losers from this documentary.
Poor Jerry Krause. Jesus Christ. Jerry Krause got stray bullets every other episode, especially for the first two. I mean, I've come, like, in the beginning, I was very pro Jerry Krause. I'm like, listen, guys, he's still the GM. He still put together a pretty strong team. He doesn't deserve all these shots that were taken. But the more and more that they really dig in about his kind of deep hatred to Phil Jackson, of which I feel like we still haven't fleshed out, it's hard for me. It's hard to be empathetic to how he was handling this type of situation. Definitely a loser in the poor situation. Well, too bad he's not alive to defend himself.
Right. Well, and Jason Hare said that was like number one priority for him, right? Like he really wanted him in this documentary. Unfortunately, he had passed right in 2017, wherever it was. But the other thing, recently, the other big, like, just to add to your point, like just watching the footage of the ring ceremony back at the United Center, and then even the rally, like they booed him. Like for them to boo him was just, you have to like absolutely hate someone to do that at a championship ceremony.
Well, I mean, we booed Doug Ford at the Raptors championship ceremony, and I don't know if everybody really just hates Doug Ford or is it just like media propaganda, like, I hate him. I mean, I hate him, but that's beside the point. Jared Krause.
We need to turn this into a drinking game every time Gabe says propaganda.
Beside the point, propaganda. Propaganda.
At noon hour, you're just absolutely obliterated.
Definitely another big loser would have to be Patrick Ewing. Anytime I think about Jordan, I always just think about Patrick Ewing always just having very poor timing about being in the league and being in college. Like every major monumental moment for Jordan's early career, it's always at the poor, detriment to Patrick Ewing. And
he's his second best offensive player on those Knicks teams is John Starks. Like that's what he had to work with.
And it just breaks my heart because he's still wearing Jordan branded stuff. And if you beat me that many times, I'm not wearing your material. It's just not happening. F you and your whole brand. But I don't know if there's much losers in this besides those two.
James?
Yeah, the losers is tough, right? Because it was pretty. I don't know. It's tough, but Krause is one for sure, man. I mean, I can sit here and say he's the best GM in NBA history, and you're gonna have a tough time arguing me, but neither of us really care or actually want to give him that kind of credit. You know, it's just kind of how it always is with him. And that sucks because he does deserve credit. But at the time, obviously he wasn't a very likable guy. You can kind of see the way he interacts with people. You wouldn't have liked him either if you were around him. So there's kind of that like hard, like, how would you feel? I don't know. I'm pretty sure I would have been annoyed by the guy too. So I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I thought up until the very end, I thought Jerry Reisenstorff was a winner. And then right at the end when he said what he said,
I agree with you. Yeah.
I thought he really fucked that up for himself.
He can be equally blamed for all of this as Krause, right? Yes. But he was under the carpet. Like for a lot of this, he was shoved under the carpet because you want to think of Krause as the villain. But then you're right. At the end, it really, really did come out. Like the truth really came out about him.
I think when you like, if you sit down at the very end, and he goes, "My biggest regret in life is not giving all those guys a 1-year or whatever. Don't even mean it. Just lie. Who gives a shit? My biggest regret is just missing that one contract." That's all he had to say. That's all he had to say. But I thought those two were good losers. I thought Horace Grant was a loser.
Yeah, I have him on my list as well. Horace Grant was definitely a loser.
No, but we didn't give him enough love, dude. That's a legitimate NBA basketball player.
Yeah, right. I thought he should have had his own storyline.
100%.
I think if Horace Grant I think Horace Grant was a much better Dennis Rodman, like especially on the offensive end, right? Like he could do maybe not as good as a rebound, but he could rebound. He's really good defensively, and he was a well-polished offensive player.
But like not only that, but also a guy that like went to other teams and stayed as a contributor, as a legitimate contributor, as an NBA All-Star at times. I don't know. I think Jordan didn't like him, and this goes again to the propaganda thing because that's why he wasn't on get the old backstory, but. Dude, I thought he was a bit of a loser there. I thought Scotty Burrell's a bit of a loser because his only FaceTime over the past 40 years is him getting ripped apart.
Yeah, but is he a loser? Because I think he showed that he survived bullying. I thought he was a winner.
Well, I don't know if you think
he's running the anti-bullying campaigns for the country now. He's like,
right.
Have you been personally victimized by Michael Jordan? I
don't. Yeah, like dude. I understand what you're saying, but if people are gonna go talk to Scotty Burrell tomorrow and be like, "Hey, dude, we respect you for taking all that shit," he's gonna be like, "I didn't need to hear that, dude. Like, that doesn't help me at all. I still have to deal basketball. Yeah, like I still have to deal with that all the time. That sucked."
Yeah. Again, I had a little more fun with this, but I had Ewing, I had Horace Grant in line with the players. I thought Drexler was kind of a loser from this because
Gary Payton as well. Gary Payton as well.
Well, I don't know if Gary Payton was a loser. I think everyone knows who Gary Payton is. A lot of fans don't really know who Clyde Drexler is, and in this documentary, he was the guy that thought he was as good as Jordan.
You know how I feel? You know how I really, really appreciate Clyde Drexler? I don't know if you guys remember Spike TV once upon a time, but there used to be a show called Pros versus Joes.
Yeah.
And Clyde Drexler was like the number one go-to basketball player. And in my mind, I remember Clyde being like a decent player. Like he was the guy. And I'm like, well, why is he on freaking Pros versus Joes? This is not something you just go on if you have money. And I realized I'm like, oh, he's really losing right now. Like this is a tough sell for this guy, poor thing. And then now you see him getting beat up in the dock.
But man, that part of the dock isn't wrong though. They don't lie about any part of that. Jordan ruined Clyde Drexler's career.
Yeah, did he ruin his career though? Because they still discuss Drexler as a top five, top 5 shooting guard of all time.
He's good and stuff, yes. But Jordan absolutely put Drexler's like success to the halt, and in that meeting in the finals. And then we talked about before. Then they go to the Olympic team, and then you see the stats, and Drexler's never the same. Jordan did that. That.
I think if Clyde was interviewed, I think we would have a little bit of a molded storyline about Clyde. But I think because he's not interviewed, you got to take a bat to him.
Clyde still says to this day he's better than Jordan. So we all know he's bad shit.
Okay, so he's got a sickness, and God bless him. You know what? I don't know if I was Clyde, I'd be saying anything different because I'm not.
That's what I mean. I'm with you.
So my other candidates for losers are pizza in Utah. I imagine pizza sales in Utah are probably going to plummet a bit. There'll be some trust issues, especially for visiting teams coming in.
that pizza store downtown Utah, wherever that was, that place specifically is going up because they all realized that they tried to poison Jordan. And
that's actually a good
all
point.
those Utah places are ordering today.
Well done.
Yeah, exactly.
A loser, I think, was Major League Baseball and the White Sox going into a lockout that year when they could have potentially had Jordan for a couple of more years. I'm sure that would have been good for the brand. A low-key one I thought about was Walter Payton. You know, everybody talked about Jordan being a hero in Chicago during that time, but Walter Payton was doing work in the NFL to the sweetness as well, right? And I mean, James, I'm sure you can attest to that given your knowledge and history of football, but I said of football. And my number one seed for Biggest Losers is Adidas. I can only imagine Adidas is watching this thinking,
what's the other one? Asics. Asics is
no,
the
Saucony.
Yeah, I brought that up on the last podcast as well. But I'm sure Adidas is just fucking kicking themselves saying, how much money did we lose?
My God, dude. Adidas would be Nike. It'd be flipped.
Would it?
That's a hot take.
I think it would.
Would it? And here's what's interesting is I don't think Adidas has the same type of marketing and design team that turns.
They don't have Phil Knight.
Phil Knight, right? You don't have Tinker Hatfield, right? So you have these guys who are like truly innovative.
Tinker, that's
designers.
who I meant. Yeah.
But they would have let Jordan make more colorways and make more of the design.
Sure, but I don't know if you've seen Kobe Bryant's shoe, but they really didn't do themselves any services. Kobe Bryant's first shoe looks like
that was also 20 years ago. That was also 20 years ago.
And that's the same time they would have had Jordan if they bombed. Yeah. They're just not good. They're not good at shoe design.
That's what I'm saying. Adidas was always with that creative mentality. I think they let Kobe actually have a lot of say in that shoe.
That was their problem.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So Jordan may have done it right, but he also may have fucked it up, I guess, too. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would love to live in the reverse universe where the Jordan brand is an Adidas brand.
I would love that too, actually. That'd be interesting.
Do you think the propaganda would be as strong?
I think whatever global impact, because Adidas is a huge global brand. I think whatever global impact we have now of Jordan, it would have been like 35-fold. It would have been like actually insane.
We would have had commercials with Ronaldinho and stuff like that, right? I'm sure he probably would have been collaborating with like FIFA.
It would have been absolutely wild. And I think FIFA would be much bigger today than it is now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good note to end the podcast on. Gabe, thanks for joining us. I know that you dropped an episode of The Brothers today, right?
Last night. But yeah,
last night, okay.
For all intents and purposes. It was fun. We're getting back into it. It's much tiresome. We're trying to figure out audio. I don't know how this shit works, but it's
yeah, tell James that he needs to give me a little more credit for the work that I do behind the scenes.
I always give you credit. I don't. I just show up with this thing on my. That's it. That's all I'm doing.
Awesome. Well, Gabe, thanks for joining us. And again, if you haven't subscribed to the Brothers Dialogue, you can find that on Spotify and anywhere where you listen to your audio.
All the places, right? All the things.
Places. Do you have anything else you want to plug? Do you want to talk a little bit about Peyton and Tiger this weekend?
I'm very, very excited. Peyton, Tiger, Tom Brady, Phil Mickelson, and here's my over/under. The over/under is obviously the over is on Peyton and Tiger. That being said,
minus 225 or something like that.
It's stupid. It's very, very stupid. But I think Tom Brady's probably a terrible golfer, but Phil Mickelson is the most dependable golfer there is. In which case, I'm putting my money on him always. And I'm going to see if this rides out. Like just past weekend, we just had Rory and
Dustin Johnson,
and I'm forgetting everybody's name.
Fowler, and I don't know who Fowler's teammate was.
Wolf is like a 21-year-old kid. He's actually a decent golfer. And again, it was entertaining golf. Like watching these guys carrying their own bag is like always entertaining. But I'm here for the shit talk. I'm here for the Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, because Peyton Manning, I don't know if you saw the Zoom call.
Dude.
Yeah, it was so funny. No, he's going to bring it. I mean, he has one of the best SB monologues to date. Like, they still play all his clips from that monologue.
Listen, he is secretly quite hilarious. Yes. And I'm ready for him to take over Monday Night Football.
Me too.
Awesome. Okay, well, Gabe, thanks for joining us. James, thanks as always. And again, happy belated birthday. Also, great photo that your I can't believe I didn't mention this, but a great photo your parents posted on your birthday. James went to Disney World and didn't tell us about it.
When I was a kid, I've been a couple times. Yeah. Don't remember much.
Damn white privilege, I tell you.
White privilege.
I think we can all
That's a wrap.
And that's a wrap. That's a wrap on the podcast. I love James' parents to death. They know that I do. Again, you can find our podcast on all platforms: Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, and of course YouTube. You can see our beautiful faces on there as well. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Last dance has been such a privilege to cover with both of you, and we got some more stuff to look forward to in the future. Gabe, I'm sure you'll be back in no time.
I'll be here.
Take care.
Thanks, boys.
Good afternoon.
Auf Wiedersehen. Cheers, guys.